The following program, offered by Fox 19, includes lawyers licensed in Kentucky. For those lawyers to maintain compliance with the Kentucky Bar Association requirements, the phrase, "This is an advertisement," must appear on the screen. Moore Law is underwritten in the public interest by the Moore Law Firm, a legal professional association. This is Moore Law on Fox 19.
Welcome to Moore Law. I'm Dan Moore, in for Deb Haas today. Today we're going to be talking about DUIs. Have you been issued a DUI? Do you need to know what your rights are? Do you need to know what the penalties are? Do you have to submit to those roadside sobriety tests? Today we're going to be talking all about DUIs. Call 513-421-4691 if you have a question for us. That's 513-421-4691. Before we take your calls, though, let's talk about what's coming up on the upcoming weeks. On September 10th, we have Business and Estate Planning. September 17th, we have Truth About Trial Lawyers. September 23rd, we have Fighting the Insurance Company. So with us this morning is my dad, Don Moore, as every Monday morning. Good to be here with you today, Dad.
Hey, it's good to be with you always, Dan.
Sure, have some fun.
Yeah, we should, and as maybe not as much fun as Deb, who happens to be in Hawaii today.
Right, we're envious.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Hey, a couple things. One, Shannon is our producer and works with us in our office. She's one of the people who takes the calls that come into the station. Both of her kids have birthdays, one today, one tomorrow. Happy birthday to AJ and Lila Seibert. And so I'd get in big trouble if I forgot that.
Yeah, you took care of business.
Okay, all right. We have an absolutely great show today. Steve Adams has been practicing over 20 years. Welcome, Steve.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Dan, Don. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Steve has been practicing for over 20 years. He's a former prosecutor. He is actually certified to administer and teach breath tests. He knows the DUI business really well from both sides of the cases. Got lots of experience with it, and I'm really glad you're able to make it.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Should be interesting to hear what the callers have for you today. You got some challenging questions, I'm sure.
It'll be fun.
Tell me, Steve, I have a couple questions just right off the bat. You know, when a lawyer says psychomotor test, what does that mean?
A psychomotor test is a standardized field sobriety test. It's a divided attention test. What the officer hopes to gain by giving this test is seeing if a person can divide their attention between doing physical tasks and mental tasks, paying attention to the instructions for the test and doing the physical test in sequence.
All right. So, like for instance, the finger to nose business. What's that? What do they have to do?
Basically, the officer is going to instruct them to close their eyes, put their finger out, and try to touch the tip of their nose, and they'll say left, right. But I want the viewers to keep in mind that that is a scientifically non-standardized test. There's been no evidence ever to indicate that test is, failing that test is going to cause someone to be impaired by alcohol. That's just something that police do, but there's no scientific reliability behind that test and being impaired by alcohol.
Okay, well, great. Thanks a lot. Let's go to our first call. I think we have Laura on the line. Laura, what can we help you with?
Yes, I'm calling. My aunt's daughter was in a fatal car wreck last month. The driver had no insurance. At the time, he did have alcohol in his system. Blood work came back that he did have numerous drugs in his system. We're saying, or they're telling us that he might get 8 years maximum. That this is the Ohio law.
Did you say he might get a year maximum?
No, 8 years.
8 years, I'm sorry.
So we are wondering how they come up with 8 years. Just don't feel that that's justice for my aunt's daughter who's in her life.
Laura, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. That's awful, and unfortunately it happens way too often. Steve, what kind of penalties are involved when a person's actually killed as a result of a drunk driver?
That's what's known in Ohio as an aggravated vehicular homicide, and by statute, by law, that would be a minimum 2-year to a maximum 8-year prison sentence if convicted.
So when Laura's talking about 8 years, that's actually the maximum?
That's the maximum.
Okay.
And there could be up to a lifetime driver's license suspension involved there too.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, you know, something I'd like to mention is that there are actually several sources of recovery for a person in Laura's family's position, and I think it's important to know. We did a little graphic about that, and since we were going to do it later, but since we've got a caller on topic, number one, you can collect against your own insurance if there's underinsured motorist coverage. That is, the drunk driver doesn't have enough insurance to cover all the harm that was done. Number two, of course, you can collect against the drunk driver's insurance. That's a potential source if they've got it. Sometimes they don't. And number three, a possible source that you can go to is whoever supplied them with the alcohol. If they bought it at a bar or at a restaurant, it is illegal to serve an intoxicated person. So in that event, you may be able to go back against the bar or restaurant. That's called a dram shop case. And Steve, I'm sure all those things are things that you're familiar with, am I right?
Yes. Well, you so more than I. I'm more familiar with the criminal aspects, but okay. There are civil aspects, no doubt about it.
All right. Well, I certainly hope that Laura and her family get a full recovery, and of course, the sentencing is something that they'll find out about before long.
Yes.
Steve, what are some of the things that people can expect if they get cited with a DUI as far as penalty goes? If it's your first time DUI, what can you look to be facing?
Well, for a first time DUI in Ohio, the person is looking at a minimum, if convicted, a minimum 3 days in jail, which is typically substituted by a 3-day driver's intervention program, up to 180 days in jail, a $375 to $1,075 fine, a 6-month to a 3-year driver's license suspension, and term of probation, which may consist of outpatient treatment and maybe some drug screens.
Okay, great.
And a license suspension, if I didn't mention that already, a 6-month to a 3-year driver's license suspension, typically driving privileges after 15 to 30 days, depending on the circumstance.
Detailed and complicated.
It is. And then when you get to multiple offenders, it even gets more complicated.
Well, why don't we go to a break right now? We'll come back with some more calls in just a minute. If you have a call 513-421-4691.
Welcome back to More Law on Fox 19, your legal questions live, with local broadcaster and award-winning reporter Deb Haas and Cincinnati personal injury attorney Dan Moore, recognized by Ohio super lawyers. More answers, more help, more law on Fox 19.
Welcome back to More Law. I'm Dan Moore in for Deb Haas. If you have your questions this morning about DUIs, give us a call, 513-421-4691. We have something that's we want to talk about, and it's kind of the worst side of the DUI realm that we can come up with, unfortunately, and it happens too often. We have a picture we want to show you, and Dad, you wanted to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is a case that, thank you, Dan. This is a case that Dan and I worked on several years ago, and it involved 2 little girls that were actually killed as a result of a DUI, and we've got a picture of where that occurred. And the unfortunate or extra sad part was it was their mother who actually killed them. She was an alcoholic, and she was still given a car to drive even though she didn't have a license. She was still had ready access to get alcohol, and people even put the 2 little girls in the car with her immediately before she left on a journey that wound up in their death. They were actually thrown from the car because they weren't properly put into car seats. And the purpose of bringing this to your attention is basically one of the things that we try and do is find places for reasonable recovery on behalf of these people. In this case, a person who supplies a car to a person that is drunk, that's negligent entrustment. There's a potential claim there. A business that supplies alcohol to a person who is intoxicated, that's a Dram Shop Act, which we mentioned a few minutes ago. And thirdly, the people who actually put the kids in the car, my goodness, talk about endangering children. They knew that she had beer in there with her and put the kids in anyway. So we look for potential sources of recovery everywhere we can when there are people who are responsible to contributing to a terrible terrible incident like that. And this is very similar to what Laura was talking about a few minutes ago, when a person has taken a loved one away because of their bad behavior. You try and look for sources to make the situation right.
Yeah, one of the saddest cases I've been involved in, but what we're trying to do here today is prevent some of that. Let's go back to the phones. We've got Connie. Connie, what can we help you with this morning?
Yes, my son is down in Cumberland Lake this weekend, and evidently he was bringing his boat in on the dock, and this undercover police officer, I guess, was down there, and they said his words was slurring, and so basically they arrested him. He's never been charged with a DUI before or anything like that, but they did arrest him for supposedly for 2 hours, and he has to go back down and do a court fine. I just wanted to see what the difference was with a DUI from the regular DUI you get driving an automobile from the difference from a boat.
I think the main difference is, in Kentucky at least, it's different in Ohio and Kentucky, but in Kentucky, if the police officer can prove that you were under the influence while boating, it's a maximum $500 fine, and you may have to do a safe boating class. It does not go on your driving record in Kentucky. Other than that, that's basically the penalty. But again, they have to prove that your son was under the influence of alcohol while operating a boat. And remember, when you're in a boat, there's something known as water legs. So it's going to be difficult for a person to be able to do any field sobriety testing once off the water on land. Typically, the cops will give a horizontal gaze nystagmus test to see if there's some jerking in the eyes that to them may indicate impairment, but studies have shown that that's not foolproof. It is foolproof, and it has to be, in order to be properly done, it should be done by a doctor and not a police officer at roadside.
So Steve, if I could now, if her son hires a lawyer, what can he expect to pay? About what does the lawyer charge for? What kind of fees are they going to charge for a case like that?
Well, a boating DUI in Kentucky is a lot different than perhaps a DUI when you're driving an automobile. And in Kentucky, if all they're facing is a $500 fine, you're not going to get any kind of suspension, and you have to do a one-day safe boating class. It's hard to justify what a normal DUI fee would be. But I would say you're probably in a low range of about $500 up to a high range of maybe $5,000.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Okay, Connie, hope that helps. Let's go to our next caller, Michael. Michael, how can we help you?
Yes, I was curious to why you can't get the DUIs expunged off your record if it's been over 15, 20 years ago.
Steve?
That's an interesting question, and a question that I frequently receive from callers and clients. Unfortunately, the legislatures of both states, at least in which I practice, Kentucky and Ohio, statutorily, DUIs are not allowed to be expunged. They're considered a traffic record, just like speeding, weaving, a muffler violation, a DUI. Those are traffic violations that are not expungible unless you go to trial and the underlying charge of, say, speeding and the DUI get dismissed. Then you can get the dismissals expunged. But if you get convicted, you're not allowed to expunge those violations.
Hey, Steve, I got a question for you. It pertains to one of the things we mentioned a few minutes ago. A lot of people think that a DUI just has to do with a car, maybe a boat, but are there other vehicles or things that people can get caught up in that DUIs can be issued for?
Yes, if you live in the country and you have four-wheelers or you're golfing and you have a golf cart, if it's on a public course or private course and there's police officers around, you could potentially get arrested for driving your golf cart while under the influence, or driving your four-wheeler while under the influence. The only thing that I'm aware of that's not illegal in Ohio is riding a horse while under the influence, because that's not a motor vehicle.
How about a bicycle?
A bicycle, yes. It's not a motor vehicle, but the law has made an exception for bicycles that you can actually get a DUI on a bicycle.
Okay. Well, thanks, Steve. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Give us a call, 421-4691. See you in a minute.